This is a Flying Cow production.
Well, hello and welcome back to Fantasy Food Showdown here on the Flying Cow Network. My name is Clay Johnson, your host, the Flying Cow himself, and we are here with Fantasy Food Showdown, the show where we are reviewing every episode of Tournament of Champions Season 6. And here with me today is my friend Patrick Hill. Patrick, how are you, sir?
Doing well, Clay. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Absolutely. I feel like it's been quite a while since we podcasted together.
I think so. I mean, I was doing the Disney trivia for a while.
Yeah.
I know we did a couple of the shows, Ghost Rider, and
yes.
did some other ones. So it's always fun to chat with you with all of your podcasting adventures. So I'm glad that I got to come into this one with related to food. And that is not my thing. I don't really watch food shows. But I was pleasantly surprised with how much I do quite enjoy them now that I have experienced Tournament of Champions.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So you've never really watched any, like you didn't watch like Chopped or Iron Chef or anything like that?
No, never. I know about them because I keep up with pop culture, and but I have never seen a single episode of Chopped, of Iron Chef, of anything. I mean, literally, if I've seen a Food Network show, it's because somebody else had it on in the background. And I don't hate food, but it's just never been something. I watch different reality shows like Survivor, Big Brother, The Mole, but I mean, the quality, the everything about the show is still. I mean, it's still a competition. So I have no idea why I've been sleeping on this. And so you might have created a monster now that I've watched one, because and so the judges' names are familiar to me because I've eaten at their restaurants or seen their restaurants. Like I know who Kat Moore is because I know her restaurant. She's got one in the Atlanta airport. So it was really neat to see her live in person.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So this is the first time having you on this season. So I would like to take a look at the bracket that you prepared.
Absolutely.
And I'm interested because, as you say, you don't really know any of you don't watch cooking shows. So you don't really know any of the chefs. How did you make your decisions? Was it just I like that name, or like
a little bit of it was vibes?
Okay.
So what I did is I just found one of those articles where it just like listed all 32 chefs, and I just kind of went down the list. First was like, do I recognize any names? And there was one, and the one name I recognized was Antonia.
Antonia LaFaso. Okay.
Yeah, Antonia LaFaso. And the only reason why I recognized her is sometime recently, can't even pinpoint when, somebody had a Food Network show on in the background. And I remember kind of catching a couple minutes of it, and she was on it. And I just remember thinking, wow, she's really good for TV. And she can cook. I mean, I remember that. Yeah. But when I was looking at these names, I'm like, well, I know her. So by default, she's going to be my winner. And then the rest just kind of fell into some random vibes. And that's how I did it, just based on first impressions with one little article.
Gotcha.
And that was it.
All right. So I'm not going to go over the whole thing. But I will say you've done okay. getting to hear not fantastic.
I mean,
But
yeah, and Tony is still in it, at least. I mean, we'll talk about where she ends up
she is.
today.
Up to this episode, um your final two were intact before we got into the episode at the very least.
Mm-hmm.
Your final four, you had Antonia and Shota, and then Leanne and Carlos.
Yes.
Now we saw in last week's episode that Shota got knocked out.
Yes.
And yeah, so unfortunately, he's not going to make it to the final four.
Nope.
But before this episode, the other three you have are still currently intact. You have in the finals Antonia and Carlos, and you have Antonia going over for the win. So, obviously, as we go through today, we'll have to see how those two shape up for. I will say Leanne has definitely made it through. So, we'll have to see how Antonia and Carlos do today.
Absolutely. So I at least got one.
yeah, you got one. You got one, lost one. Yeah.
Yep.
Which honestly, considering how I've been doing in round 2 so far, is better than I've done so far. Man, last week, honestly though, looking at our scores, last week was tough for everyone. Like, I don't think anybody got more than one match correct.
I mean, I don't think people
Jet going out.
Jet. Yeah.
No, nobody was expecting Jet. Only one, I think the one match most people picked correctly was the Britt Rossino match. There is Amanda, mutual friend of ours, who's been on an earlier episode. She actually chose Kalina over Shota, but she got all the other ones wrong. So yeah, so it's gonna be interesting going forward for all of us. But let's go ahead and let us get into these matches for today. So going into this, I just want to go ahead and say that you and I actually picked a lot of the same winners for our matches. There was, I think there's only one where you and I chose opposite people. And we will get to that when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I said, we've picked mostly the same people. We only disagreed on one. But getting into the first match, so our first match for this episode, the final episode of round 2, we have Kevin Lee versus Adam Sobel. Now, obviously, you're not familiar with either one of these guys. I know both of them mostly from this show.
Got it.
Kevin actually was a play-in last year. Started in as the number 1 seed and played a former champion, actually one of my favorites in to watch in Tournament of Champions, Brooke Williamson. And it just seemed like a foregone conclusion that she was going to go past Kevin and that everything was going to be great. And he knocks her out in the first round.
Wow.
Yeah. So obviously, he impresses most people, ticks me off. But
I mean, he impressed me last night. So, and I didn't know him from Adam.
Right. Well, speaking of Adam, Sobel.
Speaking of Adam, yes.
Yeah, his opponent Adam Sobel has also, now Guy said that he debuted in season 4. I need to look this up. I kept thinking, I was like, I don't think that Adam was in season 4, but he said it over and over and over again. So I'm gonna just double check before because I was pretty sure that the first time we saw Adam Sobel was last year.
It
But
seemed like he was definitely a rookie when it comes to these types of Tournament of Champions. And really, I mean, but I was impressed with the fact that, he's opened over 40 restaurants, like,
right.
he doesn't, I mean, but he's also won 5 awards, which some of those I think are, James Beard awards. And I don't watch these shows, but I do know a little bit about Michelin and James Beard. So,
right.
Well,
and apparently, Tournament of Champions was the first cooking competition that he did.
Okay, yeah.
He had done none of them, and then decides to do Tournament of Champions. Now, I will say he was apparently in TOC 4. I don't know why my brain blocks that out. Because I mean, it's not like I don't think he beat anyone that. Because it looks like the first season he was knocked out by Jet Tila, who was my projected winner going into
that was your number one, yeah.
Yeah, obviously that got upset last week. But yeah, I don't know why. I don't remember that he was in he's been playing longer than I thought, but he has. And he usually at least wins, I think a couple of matches. I don't think he's ever won less than 2. So, obviously he's pretty intimidating. Kevin, beat Brooke, and I think he made it all the way to the quarterfinal last year before he was knocked out. So this promises to be a pretty stout match. So, getting into the match itself, they spin the randomizer,
which was crazy.
Right, yeah. So
did they do that every episode, or every season? And
the randomizer is basically what they use. It's kind of the gamification of this this setup.
Yeah.
I have said that this show reminds me of a mix between Iron Chef and Guys Grocery Games. Guys Grocery Games, I haven't watched a lot of it, but I think they have like there's always some sort of game that they play. I think they've used things like a randomizer before on Guys Grocery Games, whereas on Iron Chef, basically at the beginning, the chairman would choose, an ingredient that had to be like the focus of like a 5-course meal that the chefs would then go off and make. But it was pretty open-ended. With the randomizer, you get selected, your protein, your veg, there's an equipment that they have to use. There's a style that's assigned, and then there's some sort of wrench that's thrown in. A lot of times in the past it has been time, but for some reason this year in both the first and second round they've decided to fix the time and do a wild card. I will say I like the wild card because it kind of, obviously time is a factor that can really throw you off, but at the same time there have been times when, a chef didn't quite get something done, and I was like, yeah, I don't want you to mess with their time. I'd rather I'd rather them have, enough time to get things done and just, throw something funky at them,
Absolutely. I loved it. I mean, again, new experience for me. And
sure.
I mean, my take is that these chefs are obviously they're champions already. We're already, we're in an all-star season, basically. So
I mean, there's a reason it's called Tournament of Champions, because these are the chefs that basically would win most of the other competitions that you would see. So it's like, let's put it's basically like the Avengers of the chef world.
Oh, yeah.
Let's put together, all of the heavy hitters and see who would win those battles. So
and I love that, because giving them this randomizer, it's like they'll be good if they can choose their own thing. I mean, they're going to do wonderful. So throw a little curveball at them and see what they can do. And I thought it was really smart.
But again, it's the same curveball, so they're on an even playing field.
Absolutely.
But yeah, so for their randomizer, they get pork porterhouse chops as the protein, delicata squash as the veg. They had to use a tortilla press, and the style that they got was Guy's birthday. And then the wild card was lower score respin. Adam Sobel ended up being the lower score, the player with the lowest score in the previous round. So he wanted to spin away from that tortilla press, and it just landed right back on tortilla press.
Yeah. He was destined.
Which I will say, that tortilla press, he was not wild about using that tortilla press, and it's actually something that bit him later on. We'll talk more about that when we get to it. But I do want to mention, so the style was Guy's birthday, and apparently Guy's birthday, I think, was because they almost landed on it in the last episode, and apparently it was his birthday that day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I mean, they didn't mention it this time, so this must have been filmed on a different day, because they did land on it here. And so basically he said, so this is basically, you are making for me what you think would be the perfect thing for me. So basically he was like, so if you were making something for me, what would the style be? And so I think it was Kevin said messy, and Adam Sobel said sweet and spicy. So those were the adjectives that they had to meet. It had to be messy and it had to be sweet and spicy. So they got to choose their own adventure there.
Yeah, which I like that. I like that Kevin chose something that you learn while they're cooking that he was hoping to throw Adam off.
It was strategic.
Very strategic choice, which I liked, and it made me immediately start rooting for Kevin, because I'm a Survivor player, and that was definitely a Survivor move.
Absolutely. And I will say we both picked Kevin in this match to win. So when it gets to what they made, so Adam ends up making celebration pork porterhouse with squash 3 ways. I will say a pork porterhouse, I think I have heard the term before, but I was excited to see this because I was like, it just kind of conjures, this must be like a hefty pork chop, because porterhouse is a rather large steak. So, you're thinking, I love a good pork chop, and I'm thinking porterhouse pork chop. This has got to be like a big old pork chop, and that's exactly what it is.
That's exactly what it was.
Big old pork chop. And so, he ends up, just really wanting to celebrate that pork, and makes his squash, uses it in 3 different ways. Kevin ends up making a sweet and spicy Korean pork porterhouse nachos.
Yes.
So I'm going to talk about that. But, I will say, I feel like at this point, it looks like Adam is basically just trying to wedge the randomizer things into what he wants to make. Whereas Kevin is letting the randomizer decide what he's making. I agree. So to me, I think that Kevin it feels like is playing smarter at this point.
100%. I mean, and he and still keeping with, you know, a theme that he created, messy, automatically nachos. Like, I thought that was brilliant.
It is brilliant. And you know, Adams, I will say the finished dish looked great, but
It did.
he's trying to make a Michelin star elevated pork dish fit with messy. And I'm just, you know, I was like, I mean, depending on who the judges are, that might work. But I think a lot of judges are just going to look at this and say, yeah, this isn't what I think when I think messy.
Yeah, I realized watching these that, like I said, they're all champions. The food's gonna taste good, but it's really all about that randomizer and how you're incorporating like the choices and the style and pairing it together. That's really what I kind of kept hearing from the judges, and also that they didn't do what Adam did, which is check those boxes. Just check the boxes off the randomizer and just make it fit into what, like a square peg into a round hole. And sure, it looked pretty and I'm sure it tasted great, but he didn't do the assignment as well as Kevin, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I do want to mention, as you said, Kevin ends up making what he calls Korizo, which is a Korean chorizo. The moment he said that, I'm like, okay, I want to try this.
I wanted to eat it too.
I love Korean food. I love, you know, like kimchi and all of these, you know, Korean flavors. And I love a good chorizo. So just the idea of this like Korean influenced chorizo, I'm like, that sounds.
And I love nachos. So it's like a perfect world. I was like, I want to eat this dish.
Oh yeah. Before even seeing it, I'm just like, that's what I want. But yeah, so I really loving the look of what Kevin is doing. They're both using the tortilla press. So Kevin ended up using it on the pork basically to make a cutlet, which I thought was super smart, because usually how you're going to do that is you're going to get a meat mallet and you're going to pound it out.
Pound the heck out of it. Yeah.
But he just uses this tortilla press and it's like instant. And I was like, that is brilliant. That is so smart. And not Kevin, Adam used it on the squash. He said to kind of break up the membrane around the seeds. But I'm like, well, that just makes it one big flat surface. I think it'd be easier to core it. And then but I was like, okay, all right. I'm not really sure what,
I mean, maybe if you were making, like, if it was plantains and you were making like plantain chips, but like this is a squash. Like, not really what you were. I mean, he took it literally. He squashed the squash.
I mean, it almost, and I think Andrew brought this up later. It felt like he was just ticking a box.
Yeah.
It felt like he was like, well, I have to use this tortilla press. What can I use it on? Squash.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It didn't really seem to serve a purpose.
No.
Which
and I think that Kevin did a more daring thing, taking the main part of the dish and utilizing it.
Well, and like we said, using it in a very innovative way. But yeah, so you know, when these dishes are finished, do you remember, like, was there one that you were like, oh, I definitely want that one over the other?
I really wanted to try those. I wanted the nachos to win, and I wanted to try them. I mean, I love a good fancy Michelin dish, but I mean, when I think of Guy, because I do know him, I think exactly what that nacho dish was. Like, he's that kind of energy, that kind of personality, and I think that Kevin did exactly what he needed to do to match it.
Well, what he did is he made diner food.
Yes.
For crying out loud.
And it's Guy
One
Fieri.
of Guy's
like, that's
most well-known
do.
shows is Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives.
Yep.
Of course,
I do
for
know
his
that
birthday,
show.
you're gonna make him diner food. It just makes sense.
Yep.
But yeah, so I mean, what I said is I want Kevin's. I thought Adams looked great, but I felt like for the challenge, Kevin's made more sense.
Absolutely. And I believe I agreed with most of the judges' commentary on that too.
yeah. Getting into the judges, I will say in the most of the time, they kind of save the reveal of who the judges are, and like they'll show like glimpses of them. So I usually have fun trying to guess, but in the last couple of episodes, for one reason or another, they have just decided to show us previews of the judges talking, and I'm just like, oh, I mean, I will say I think part of it is that in both episodes, the judges had a reaction that was so strong that they just wanted to use it in the previews.
Oh yeah.
Because, it adds anticipation. So I mean, those reacts are actually going to happen later on. But yeah, they've given up on the judges reveal because we see Andrew Zimmern and Scott Conant talking in a preview. So we know they're two of the judges. I will say I didn't know who the other judge was, but the moment that they started her introduction, they said the first female Iron Chef. Kat Cora.
Everyone knows that Kat Cora. I knew it was Kat Cora, and I'd never seen Iron Chef.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, that's just one of the things that is synonymous with Iron Chef, with Kat Cora. First female Iron Chef, Kat Cora. That's just, So, yeah, we have Kat Cora, Andrew Zimmern, and Scott Conant. And I will say, before this show, like I had seen like bits and pieces of Andrew Zimmern in other Food Network shows, and I think I've seen like bits and pieces of like his travel logs and things like that. Like that's what Andrew Zimmern is known for, is like being like an international foodie. Like he is like highly knowledgeable of these international cuisine. But the thing that I really learned from this show is how he is a tough judge. And this episode,
that's him. He
was tough. Like there would be times that the other two, and we're talking heavy hitters, Kat Cora and Scott Conant, both heavy hitters, but they would literally say almost nothing negative about the dish, and Andrew would drop something. And, very often it wasn't something huge, but he always had something negative.
And I wonder how much would be edit.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. You do wonder if maybe the others had more nitpicky negative things to say and things like that. But they always allowed Andrew to have that kind of, I guess it's, maybe they wanted to show, the pedigree that he has, that he is the guy that is going to find the smallest thing.
Yeah. And he was like the Simon Cowell of the three. If I'm equating it to American Idol, because I have watched that for several years back in the day, where he got to be the more critical one, while the other two, I mean, they were critical, but they were much more praiseworthy than they were critical, at least based on.
And obviously Andrew did quite a bit of praising.
Oh yeah. But he threw that
in had later. At least one thing. And I don't want to say negative. I think it's more like this is a way that the dish could have been better.
Oh yeah, constructive criticism, 100%.
Exactly.
Like, there's no question that every judge knew that every contestant is a champion. They,
Right.
they just went.
Absolutely.
That was the base, and then everything else was above that.
Yeah. So, getting into the actual judging, they like Adams, good flavors, and I will say, Kat pointed out what we had, because Adam's version of messy is he had a sauce and he basically did a Jackson Pollock on the plate. And I was like, to me, that's art. That's not messy.
Not messy. 100%.
Yes. And Kat actually said, she was like, I see the messy, but it's not the right kind of messy. And I'm like, yeah, it's not. She was like, it's not working in the right direction. It's not the kind of messy that I'm looking for.
Yeah, it wasn't guy's birthday messy.
Right. It was, well, I gotta be messy, so splat.
Yep. Let's check that box.
Exactly. And honestly, that I don't remember hearing it in this judging. I will say, Andrew definitely mentioned that in his summation when he was talking to Simon after this match, which I'll get more into in a second. But that was one of the things that Andrew kept hitting on, is when it felt like chefs were ticking the box. And it felt to me like Adam did a lot of that.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So they get Kevin's, and Kat is impressed by the risks. Zimmerman also really loved it. He said that he would have liked more pork. He would have liked there to be more use of the pork, but he really liked it. And Scott said that he thought it was the perfect dish for Guy's birthday. So I'm hearing this judging, and to me it feels pretty aimed towards Kevin. Did you have the same feeling?
I did. I mean, I think the show tried to keep it vague, but and for some of these matches, it was vague. But this one, I felt like it was leaning Kevin the whole time.
Well, here's the thing. After the judging, number one, Adam, I think that he kind of gave away the fact that he had a completely different perspective on what was expected. He was not expecting this judging at all. I think that if he had been one of the judges and he saw Messi, he would have been expecting what he did.
Oh yeah.
And so he was not expecting the judging that he got. So it very much sounded to me like he thought that Kevin was going to win. By the time the judging was over, it felt to me like Adam knew he was done. And I honestly agreed with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so getting into the actual scores, the final scoring was 82 to 75. Kevin with the win.
Yeah.
And I will say 75 is a lower score for this point in the tournament. The majority of chef scores have been in the 80s. So I really think, and again, we talked about it. Obviously the food is good, but there's so much rides on the way you play the game, and I just don't think that Adam played the game the way that he needed to. And I honestly think that a lot just depended on, I think he was thinking too much about his expectations rather than he wasn't thinking about the style. It was Guy's birthday, not his birthday.
Yeah, if he's not getting a James Beard Award for this competition, he needs to win by playing the game.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Yeah, and he needs to think about who, in this case, it literally is who he's cooking for, because technically it's Guy's birthday, even though Guy didn't actually get a plate.
Yeah.
But that while I'm sure that if he'd made that for Guy would have been like, oh, thanks, man. With Kevin, it was like perfect.
Yep.
And so it's like, you got to think about your style. You really got to think this through.
The minute I heard nachos, I was like, this is going to be tough to beat.
Yeah. The scoring breakdown, Kevin won on every level. He honestly, the majority of his points were actually in taste. 42-37. Also beat him in the randomizer 32-31. And in presentation by 1.8-7. So yeah, this just was Kevin's match. I feel like if Adam, honestly, I think what Adam really should have spun away from was not the tortilla press, although the use of that did hurt him, as Andrew pointed out later. He basically just felt like it was he didn't think it was very creative. He felt like he was just ticking the box. But I think what he needed to spin away from was Guy's birthday. I just don't think that he thought really what that meant.
Yeah.
And the judges obviously did. And yeah, it just wasn't what they were looking for. So yeah, getting into then let's go ahead and let's take a look at our scores. So let's see my scoring for this. Let's see. So well, actually we'll do yours first, because so the final score ended up being 82-75. I think we both overscored this one. Because you had 87-85.
I did, 85.
So
yeah.
You were actually, you missed Adams by 10 points.
Yep.
My score, let's see if I can pull this one up real fast. My score for this, so I actually said the same thing. I said 87-85. So we were both off by quite a bit.
Yeah, I had them both a little too elevated.
Yeah. But yeah, so the next one, the next match, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. The next match was Carlos versus Nini. So, we saw them. Oh, excuse me. We saw both of them actually with upsets in the first round. Both actually super impressive. Carlos knocking out a former finalist in Amanda Freitag, and Nini knocking out Chef Cepeda, who it was her first time in the competition, but well-known chef, really good at what she does. And Nini was just, totally outscored her. So coming away from this match, I'm really impressed with both of them. Carlos has, he got knocked out in the first round, like 2 or 3 tournaments in a row, to the point where Guy actually made him play in to get his spot. He won, and then like I said, had a huge upset against Amanda. So I'm really hoping for big things for him. So you and I actually both picked Carlos in this match.
Yeah, I mean, the stats say that even though he was a lower seed, I mean, he's won more awards, he's opened more restaurants, he's won, he's competed more. Like, so I just thought this will be a shoo-in, not known him, just looking at the stats. And and then I met him. I'm like, oh, he's also real good for TV. He plays that like kind of cocky, chef.
He's very high energy.
Mm-hmm.
He's very, scattered in a fun way kind of thing. Yeah. And then, you've got Nene, who's, I mean, she's just ridiculously cute.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I mean, to the point that, Carlos actually, in my opinion, made a pretty big mistake. But we'll talk about that in a second. But honestly, I'm sitting here and I'm like, I've picked Carlos, but I got a little bit of a crush on Nene. So I'm split here. I'm like, and my gut is actually telling me I think Nene's actually gonna win this, but I've picked Carlos, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna be upset no matter who wins, but for some reason my gut is telling me that it's gonna be Nene, and I'm just like, but and I did this to myself last week too with Showdown and Kalina, and for some reason I think if I had picked this later than I did, I would have chosen Nene, but at the time that I picked, I chose Carlos.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
I'm
my
feeling
picks were basically vibes. And so
sure.
I went in, and once I started evaluating, I was like, I leaned toward Nene too. I was like, oh, this girl's got this. I forgot who I put already. Like, sure, Carlos.
Right.
So you're fun, but Nene is going to take this, I think.
Yeah, she's just got a great presence, and she's very very smart in what she's doing. And let's go ahead and let's get into it. So when the randomizer spins, initially we get beef tenderloin as the protein, shishito peppers. They had to use an immersion blender, and the style was initially champagne brunch. And then the wild card was Chef's Respin. Now, on Chef's Respin, basically they have to come to a consensus and decide what is going to be respun. Right away, we are hearing talking heads from Carlos saying how excited he is about champagne brunch. He's not talking at all about the tenderloin, the peppers, the blender, updated anything else. What he is talking about is the champagne brunch. And Nene, Carlos is like, I'm a gentleman. What would you like to respin? And Nene goes, I'd like to respin the style.
Yeah.
Immediately, I know. Yeah, I know in my head that Carlos is screaming in his head, I'm so excited about champagne brunch. No, I want champagne brunch. But what he says is, sure, let's respin it. And I'm just like, honestly, Carlos, I can't blame you. I would have made the exact same decision because Nene's a cutie. I would have absolutely done the same thing. But I know that Carlos has got to be kicking himself because it respins and it lands on updated classic. And I honestly feel like, we saw it. He struggled to come up with a classic he
was doing things way too much on the fly for my I was worried for him.
Sure. I mean, I will say, depending on the chef, that can actually really work. Like, I think you should go back and watch some previous seasons because Brooke Williamson, her go-to was they would be like, "Chef, what are you making?" She's like, "I don't know." And she'd just start making stuff and it would be brilliant.
I mean, that's good talent and artistry right there.
Yeah, exactly. And so for some people, that can really work. But I really think that the moment that Champagne Brunch popped up there, Carlos had everything figured out in his head. And then, Nene bats her eyelashes at him and convinces him to respin it. And suddenly I think he's in a tailspin and doesn't know what to do.
And then decides to go with a dish you don't even cook on a cooking show.
Yeah. So he ends up making tatami style tenderloin tartare, which that basically means that you sear that you sear the
which
one
wasn't
side
his initial decision. He did that.
No,
on the fly.
he did that like last minute. Yeah.
And I think that was another mistake because he got dinged for it later.
But yeah, he does the tartare with ají amarillo sauce and crispy plantains. And they even say when he tells them that he's doing tartare that that is very risky.
Yep.
Because tartare is not everybody's bag.
Nope.
And it can actually be really difficult to impress with a tartare. Now, I will say one of the reasons that he got to the second round was because he took a huge risk. He made a mole and this huge albondiga that just had such depth of flavor that it wowed the judges, and that's what really won him the first round. So he's again going for a huge swing, and he's feeling like it's gonna pay off. We'll have to see with that. Nene ends up making shishito steak au poivre with fries. So she's going pretty basic. She's kind of using the shishito peppers in this sauce to kind of jazz it up a little bit from the the regular dish. But let's see. Oh yeah, I mean, I wrote when I saw Updated Classic, like I would have spun away from Updated Classic. Like I just feel like that's a difficult thing. I think
I do think that was harder than Champagne Brunch, most definitely.
Yeah, I feel like Champagne Brunch is pretty open-ended, whereas Updated Classic, you have to pick a classic dish and do it in a different way. That is much more specific than a Champagne Brunch. And last year, I'm pretty sure it was last year, somebody lost on Updated Classic because they chose a classic dish that nobody had heard of. Oh. And so it's like it really is taking a gamble at, I mean, I will say his was that he was too he was a Michelin star chef that is only thinking about Michelin star dishes, so he's thinking way too elevated,
too high level. We need to bring it down.
And so half the judges, I think like maybe one was like, I kind of recognize this dish, but I don't know that I'd call it a classic. It's a good dish, but I don't know if I would call this a classic. And so it's very open into interpretation. I will say, I think both of these chefs did actually choose classic dishes.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, steak au poivre, maybe not everybody has heard of, but steak and fries, everybody knows that.
Yep. And
Yeah.
she made that beef perfect. It looked
Absolutely.
amazing, and the judges agreed with the way I thought it looked. So
Yes, absolutely. So Nini ends up doing a tempura shishito. I thought that was actually
I thought that
really
was smart.
smart.
Very
Looked
smart.
really good. Carlos does the plantain, which he's doing a lot. He's incorporating a lot of things in this tartare that are not typically in tartare, which is part of his updating of the classic, which if you pull it off, is
It didn't
really
sound
smart.
bad. I mean, putting like the
No.
mango and the like other kind of tropical. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I
flavors.
think he did like a salsa in it,
Yeah,
which
it
is
sounded
definitely
great.
not typical, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely adding some flavor to the tartare, which is something that you have to be very careful of with tartare is under seasoning, because then otherwise it's just a plate of raw meat.
You're just eating raw meat.
Yeah, you really have to the flavors there have to be on point if you are going to make a successful tartare. So we're they're both being really innovative when it gets to the final dishes. I will say, steak tartare is probably not something that I'm going to order on a menu. But seeing the finished dish, I was intrigued by Carlos's. I was definitely interested, but if I had to choose between the two, I was going to choose Nini's.
I agree. I think I would have enjoyed both, but
Sure.
I mean, beef tartare I've had, but it's not my go-to order.
Sure.
In fact, thinking about it, I would rather have like like a poke bowl, like where it's
Sure.
than beef. But I've had it; it's fine.
Yeah.
I would have much rather had that perfectly cooked beef that was on her
It
plate.
it was just beautiful.
It was gorgeous, and I was
And
like,
then
"Oh, I want her to cook for me all the time."
and that sauce looked
Mm-hmm.
amazing, and yeah, with the fries and everything, it sounded and looked like a really good dish.
I was
So
like learning
getting
things. I was like learning how you like the best way to fry things and stuff. I was like, "Oh,
yes,
look at this! I didn't know."
yeah, oh, absolutely. So getting into the judging, so it seems like the tartar was actually pretty successful. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that it was serious but not too serious. That I think they appreciated the leaps that he was taking. The one criticism was Andrew mentioned that he felt like if you are going to do a sear on a tartar, then you need to actually get like a sear on it. You need to get like a crust on that tartar, and he didn't feel like the sear went far enough.
And I think that's where Carlos, shot himself in the foot. Is that yeah, he was thinking on the fly, but he only had like 5 minutes left, and he was like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah,
I'm just going to do this real quick."
he
But
he didn't have the time to get
he
the
did not
sear
have
that
the
he
time.
really needed. And at that point, if you can't get the sear, which and I don't know, like at no point did he say, "Oh, I didn't get the sear that I wanted." I don't really think that he was thinking in those terms,
I don't think so
but
either.
at the same time, he didn't disagree with Andrew's note. You know,
I think it
and
was a great
so
piece of criticism. I mean, I
yeah,
think he did agree with it. Yeah.
I think he just didn't think that it's not enough time to get the sear that I want. I think he was just like, a sear would really make this good, and just didn't think about that it probably should have gone a little further.
Yeah.
And then Nini's, so they just called it fun, perfect cook, delicious sauce, all of this stuff. And then again, we get Andrew with the one bit of criticism. And the one bit of criticism that he had is that he wasn't sure if it was updated enough.
I was worried about that for her too,
Sure.
because I mean, at the end of the day, it was.
Well, I mean, she even said that it wasn't that different from a typical au poivre sauce.
Yeah, she added the peppers, yes, which
Right.
you know changed it up. I'm glad actually that she did the tempura, because I feel like had she not done something else with those peppers, she may
Right.
not have won. Which
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, yeah. So I will say, going into this, simply because both critiques were so slight, I honestly had no clue
I wasn't sure either.
was going to win this. I mean, thinking back about it now, it feels a little more leaned toward Nini. But you know, neither one of those critiques necessarily feels worse than the other.
Mm-mm. Just for different reasons, you know, like they're for different reasons, and you can kind of, I think, tell that in the points.
Yeah. So getting into the actual scores, so it ended up being a 1 point difference.
Now, is that normal?
I mean, it definitely has happened on occasion.
Okay.
So it has, I mean, happened. Honestly, yeah. I mean, it's not the first time it's happened this season.
Got it.
It's happened. I think it actually happened like 2 or 3 times in the first round. In fact, there have been times that at least the final score has actually been resulted in a tie.
Oh.
And they've had to go to the tiebreaker, which is basically descending in order, taste, randomizer, and then plating. There actually is one match, and I'm not going to be specific just in case anybody wants to go and watch it, because it is quite a thing to see. But there was actually one match in the history of the show that was a dead tie.
Wow.
Every single category was a tie.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had to be really creative about how they figured that one out.
How to break that tie.
Yeah. But yeah, so this one ended up being a win by 1 point for Nini Nguyen. She won by 1 point in taste.
Yes. Which
40-39. The others, like I said, were tied. They both got 32 in the randomizer. They both got 8 for presentation. And when they talked to the judges after the match, it came down to Scott really loved Nini's sauce.
Yeah, he really pushed. I mean, I've, traveled to France a couple times. You know, we're talking about that before the podcast. And a good sauce makes or breaks a plate. I know that as an eater.
Does. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there have definitely been. Yeah, there have definitely been times that I'm like, this is great. All it needs is a good sauce.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I mean, I actually spent some time with my brother and his husband a couple weeks ago, and they took me to this really nice restaurant, and I ordered crab cakes. The crab cakes were great, but I was like, I didn't get a sauce, which honestly I feel like is not typical.
No, you usually have some type of like remoulade or, something.
Right. So I actually ended up ordering a sauce from a different dish. Because I was
Fascinating.
like, this is good, but it needs a sauce to just kind of pick it up a little bit,
You should write that restaurant and be like, listen, you need to combine these foods.
I mean, I told them, I was like, this just needs a sauce, and they were like, oh, okay, yeah. But yeah, sometimes that you just need one. But yeah, so that is the match. So you and I have both lost our first match.
Yep.
In this, but again, I'm not mad. My gut told me Nene was gonna win anyway.
Same. I was just like, yeah, you know what? I go by vibes, but then the minute my vibe is the second I saw them, and I was like, oh no, the vibe's the other way.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's true. So going then into the third match. So we have David Viana versus Sarah Bradley. And I will say this is the first season, the first tournament that I have seen either one of these chefs. David actually played in. David has actually scared me a little bit. Because he played in actually beat the person I was rooting for in that play-in match. And then a couple of weeks ago, he beat one of my projected Final Four, Tobias Durzon, with a score of 91.
Oh, wow.
And in both matches, he's just being so innovative that I'm just like, this guy just really seems on the ball. He just, like I said, he was scaring me because, he's every time I'm rooting against him and he keeps taking out the people that I actually want to win. And so I will say I actually, in my revised bracket, had him going rather far, in the tournament. And then his opponent here, Sarah Bradley, I had not seen before, but she is apparently very well known in other competition shows. She's competed twice in Top Chef, and I think she's been runner-up both seasons that she competed in Top Chef. And also the first match that I saw her in, I thought her food was great, but what really impressed me is just the way that she carries herself.
100%.
She is such a natural when it comes to food competition shows. She is a show person. Like, she
never looks stressed.
She's very at ease.
Helps David.
David, honestly,
don't do that.
Honestly, if it were not for her, David would have done worse.
Oh yes, 100%
in this match. We'll talk about it when we get there.
Yeah,
but yeah, she actually, honestly, to the point where I was like, Sarah, I know he's your friend, but he's also your competitor. You should stop helping him.
I mean, I think she was that confident that her dish was going to work, that she didn't want to lose. She didn't want to win. I'm trying to get in her head, but she's like, that's going to ruin your dish, and I'm just going to win in a landslide. Can we please at least equalize this?
Well, and I think a lot of it, like I said, they were friends. They competed together in Top Chef. So I think she just didn't want him making stupid mistakes.
Oh yeah, don't make a fool of yourself. We're all champions here.
I want to beat you. And I think she actually said that she wanted to beat him on his best game.
Yeah. 100%. I would too, and that made me love her. I had her winning against Vibe.
Yeah.
But when I finally was introduced to her, I was like, oh, you're fantastic. Like, I really enjoy you.
I will say this is actually the match where you and I had chosen different competitors, but once again, I am choosing against what I actually want. And this one, though, was more in the first 2 matches I saw him in, David just scared me so much that I was like, I was voting more for what I thought was going to happen rather than what I actually wanted to happen.
Yeah.
You know, and I just it has taught me that there need to be times when I go against that, because this is the 3rd time, and we'll talk about it, but this is the 3rd time that has bitten me. So we get into the randomizer, and we get, for protein, rack of lamb, dandelion greens as the produce. They have to use a meat grinder, and it has to be date night dinner is the style, and the wild card was stay or total respin, and they basically decided to just stay.
Which, it was a great choice for both of them,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I think, looking at this, the only thing that makes me scratch my head a little bit is dandelion greens, just because, like, I know I've definitely seen it used, but I just always think, what, are you just gonna go in your yard and pick dandelions? And
right.
Obviously, they're chefs, they've used it doesn't scare them. It just kind of, just the, I guess, the abundance of the item kind of, and having it not be something that I would typically cook with.
Well, and it's not, in a normal restaurant, that's not the kind of green you're going to get. Now, I have actually had dandelion greens before, and the only thing I remember is, wow, they're bitter. Like, you've got to do something with them, or they're just not going to be that good. And I love collards. I love turnip greens. I love greens. I've only had dandelion greens maybe once, and I just remember thinking, bitter, bitter, bitter.
Yes. And that definitely is something that they mentioned about, cutting the bitterness, dealing with the bitterness. Getting into the actual cook, the first note that I have is I enjoyed how clearly friendly and supportive they were of each other.
I loved it.
It was great. I mean, as we mentioned, to a degree that I was like, okay, I know you're friends, but stop.
Yeah, like, don't you want to win? But I mean, it speaks volumes about her and their friendship, which I
and here's the thing: even though I've got David winning this match, I am rooting against him actively, because, and I should have known that this is not what I should have picked, because it was the same thing last year when Kevin beat Brooke. I immediately just wanted to see somebody knock him out.
Yeah.
And so with David taking out Tobias, I just, obviously, like I said, I know he's good. He's a talented chef, but he took out Tobias. I want to see him lose now. That's just, that protective, you took out my favorite. You go down now.
Yeah. But let me tell you, when I started seeing what Chef Sarah was making, some of the added ingredients, I was like, oh, this makes my mouth water. Like, I'm a huge lamb person, but if you cook it right, I will eat it.
Oh, I love lamb. I love it. So yeah, so Sarah ends up making a roasted rack of lamb crusted with Meyer lemon and
Yum.
pistachio.
Yum.
Which, yeah, all of that. I'm just like, yep.
I can taste those
I'm here for
flavors,
it.
and I just know in my brain that they work perfectly.
Yes. And she also did, I don't know why it's not mentioned here, but she also did a side of the dandelion greens, kind of stewed, kind of almost prepared like a collard,
Yes.
but not cooked to the same uh depth. She said that, you have to really stew collards for a while, whereas if you do that with dandelion greens, you'll kind of cook them to death.
Oh yeah. That, again, learn something new. I mean, I don't know the next time I'll be cooking dandelion greens, but I love the fact that she knew exactly what to do, and the presentation, I'm sure it tasted wonderful, but the presentation was beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. So then David makes a date night lamb with dandelion green sauce and potatoes. And I will say, and I just want to point this out because I enjoy talking about our sideline commentators. We've got, Justin Warner and Tiffany Faison. Tiffany actually is a former winner. She's a former champion.
I heard that.
Yes.
I like her.
Won.
I like her.
Tiffany is great. I feel like it's just been like an unintended segment every week. We end up talking about how great Tiffany is. Like she really is. But Justin, I also enjoy Justin because, he's got a weird, quirky personality. And he's often making puns, but he's also really knowledgeable about food and the science of food and things like that. But there was a bit here where, because Justin was serving as the liaison for David, and David, and there was just something about David's energy. The moment that this started, I was almost like, I almost thought this is over. Like there was just something kind of manic about his whole energy that hadn't been in his previous matches, that I was just like, I feel like he's in his own head. Because they always ask, initially, what are you going to make? And so that they can kind of give them, a starting point. And, throughout, as they're making changes and doing things, they're making notes and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Hats off to them. It's not an easy job. I know, as taking notes while I'm watching, it's a tough gig. But they are, he's rattling off, and I just wrote down, I was like, this description is so manic. At one point, I noticed towards the end, Justin kind of like looked off to the camera, like he almost did like a Jim from The Office, where he just kind of spiked the camera for a second and looked almost as if to say, I hope you guys got all that, because I only caught half of it. Like Absolutely. It was just like, it was so just meandering the way that he was describing this dish, and it sounded like so much. And I don't know how much of that he actually ended up doing. Like it just, it really sounded that they were the polar opposites of each other, because you got really Sarah, who's so cool, calm, collected, making jokes, playing with the audience.
She knew what she wanted to do. She was like, oh yeah, I do this, and this is how I do this. And then you got David throwing those lamb chops into that pan and giving me anxiety.
Yes. Well, to the point, and this is the point at which we said that Sarah really saves David, because he starts grinding some lamb but he'd already said that he was gonna do like a date night lamb. So he's like gonna sear this lamb chop. And they're like, so what are you doing with the ground lamb? And he's like, I'm going to do lamb 2 ways. And Sarah, and here's the thing, we've mentioned in the past, you know, there was actually 2 matches in a row where a chef made basically 2 dishes and it really ended up biting them. And for one of them, Justin took the camera aside and was basically like, it's never a good idea to do that in a competition like this because they just end up judge against itself. So you're basically splitting the vote against yourself.
Yeah.
But the thing is, it is not his job to tell David. It is Justin's job to report what David has done. And, he can, if David is forgetting to hit one of the randomizer ingredients, he can just be like, hey, when is this going to happen? He can help in that way, but he can't advise. He can't tell him not to do something. That's just not his job. But
Sarah
honestly, but that is nobody's job. Sarah takes it upon herself to say, David, do you think that's a good idea? Because they're just gonna end up judging against themselves. And I am honestly in my head screaming, Sarah, let him do it. Just let him do it. Again, I have chosen him, and I am actively wishing Sarah would allow him to sabotage himself.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's doing at this point.
Not have the heart.
Really no, she just didn't. And I think she also recognized that he was getting in his own way, that he was overthinking, and she wanted to pull him back from the brink. She's thinking about her friend. She's not necessarily thinking about the competition at this point. So, I mean, hats off to her. I do appreciate, like I said, that feeling. But at the same time, even though I picked him, I wanted to see David lose.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So, he ends up pivoting and instead puts that ground lamb into a sauce. Sarah ends up putting a lot of her produce through the meat grinder. We're getting down towards the end, and David discovers that his lamb is undercooked, so he's got to fix it real quick. He ends up doing it, but when something like that happens, there's always the fear of, okay, did we fix it? Is it still under? Is it over now?
I was worried. Yeah. I was like, either you're about to ruin your dish, or you're going to get DQ'd somehow because you're going to serve raw meat.
Right. I will say, lamb like steak, you can serve, in a more raw, in a more rare preparation.
I like
but there is such a thing as too rare. And I will say, when he cut that, it looked like it had not been cooked at all.
The middle section was still raw. I mean, it would have not, and that combo would have tasted awful.
Yeah. It really wasn't what he wanted to put on the plate. But yeah, so he does end up rescuing that. So then getting into the final looks, just looking at what Sarah's doing, I've actually written earlier that just before she's finished with anything else, her lamb looks fantastic.
Amazing.
Like, it
and
just looks so good.
then doing it in that with the pistachio crust and the lemon.
Yes.
I was like, please give that to
Yeah.
me right now. It was
Yeah.
so pretty. It was so pretty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, I will say the finished dish, I actually thought they both looked really good.
Oh yeah.
I think I would have chosen Sarah's by a hair, and it's simply because I really enjoy simple plating. And she had such a simple, elegant plating that I think that's just where but David's looked really good, and his plating looked great too. It
Yep.
just, her aesthetic kind of appealed to me just a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, it felt very date night, which I liked.
Yeah, I think
if
they both
made that for me, I would be very happy.
Right? Jeez, yeah. But yeah, so getting into the actual judging. So Sarah went first. Scott said that it was craveable. Kat said that if this was served to her for a date night, they would be getting engaged.
Oh yeah, there was like a "take me to the altar" quote.
Oh yeah, Andrew right after said engaged. I'm saying take me to the altar.
Yeah,
we're getting married. Yeah,
really funny.
So yeah, so like it just kind of kept escalating with them. The one negative that Andrew had is that he would have preferred a better use of the grinder. He felt like just putting the produce in there did feel a bit like ticking a box for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, otherwise they loved it. And then for David's, Andrew loves his sauce. Kat felt like the lamb for her, and she did specify for her, was a little over. I will say nobody else said anything about it being I think somebody else said that the lamb cook was good for them, but Kat at least felt like hers was a little over, which we had said was a fear.
Yeah. I mean, he didn't have that. I mean, Sarah's was just perfection. Like she didn't have that fear of like, oh no, it's over. It's not cooked enough. I got to do something real. She just was like, yep, this is just going to be perfect. And it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And Scott loved the sauce. So the thing that everybody's raving about in this one is the sauce.
Mm-hmm. And they love, and again, when you have a good sauce, I was like, I don't know who's gonna win now, because if the sauce wins it for him.
Yeah, see, honestly, like it felt really tight to me. I actually I wrote maybe David. Like I really wasn't sure at all. But yeah, I just wasn't sure. And so getting into the actual score, it ended up being another 1 point game.
1 point game, yep.
87-86, Sarah won. And she actually won by 1 point for the randomizer.
I love it.
Yeah. Which I'm not entirely certain what it was about her randomizer that put it over the top. They did talk to the judges, but they weren't really, there was nothing that they talked about that I think they were talking in praise about both dishes. So there was nothing that made me understand why they chose Sarah's over David's in that wrap up. But I will say that the The scoring breakdown was 43 in taste. They both got. Sarah won by 1 point in the randomizer, 35-34. Presentation, they were tied with 9 points. So, something that Sarah did they felt was a little bit more innovative than David. I will say, I actually thought that her grinding the produce was innovative. Like I said, Andrew kind of knocked that, but I think that the other judges might have given, maybe an extra point for that. I don't know.
I mean, the other thing too is like, she actually served the dandelions as a side as opposed to making it the sauce, which was smart. Sure. But that, I mean, I think I would have liked it better if I were the judge. I would have probably given her more of the point because the dandelion greens were not just kind of, you didn't
right. I think what David really should have done is do a sauce, but then also have like a green preparation as well.
Kind of what Nina did with the peppers, basically.
Yes,
where she
exactly.
Put it in her
served it two ways. She did it in the sauce, and she did I mean, you will find a lot of times that is what will often win you for the randomizer is just using it in as many ways as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, so that was that match. So you won this. I did not. So you were actually up a match on me in this one. And we picked the same person on the next one. So either way, you're actually winning this episode between the two of us.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
This next match but got let me take
But let me take a look at your scores here. So the actual score was 87-86, and you said
80-84.
Where'd it go? Okay, 80-84. So yeah, not quite close enough.
Yeah.
But not
I
not
overshot the first one and I undershot this one.
Sure. But yeah, so getting then into the final match, and this is the big one. They're always going to save the anticipated match, the big match, or at least the one with the favorite seed, the number one seed or the highest ranked seed that's competing for last. So we have Antonio Lafaso going up against Rocco DeSpirito. And Rocco competed in the first
he was a judge, right? They kept talking about how he was a judge recently.
Well, yeah, so he competed in the first tournament. And I think he got knocked out in the first round, and after that basically just decided that he wanted to be a judge instead. So that's what he's been doing in all of the other seasons. And this season he decided to come back and compete, and actually did pretty well in his first match, won his first match. But he's going up now against Antonio, and Antonia, and this is the thing. Rocco is obviously he's a renowned chef. He knows what he's doing. He's been a judge in countless other things. It's just he hasn't competed in Tournament of Champions in a while, and he's going up against Antonia, who has had kind of an up and down journey in Tournament of Champions. She did pretty well in the first tournament, and I think the second one, and then I think she went 2 years in a row where she got knocked out rather early.
And then
To the
last
point where
year
I
they
think,
talked about she was runner-up.
yeah, last year she went all the way to the finals and lost by 1 point.
Who beat her?
Manit Chauhan.
Okay.
Yeah. Who, I mean, Manit is the only 2-time champion. She's fierce. Yeah, she is, hard to beat. And so, Antonia is just at this point, she is determined to win this tournament. She has already, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, she really wants to win this. And I get it. I don't blame her. So I have Antonia winning this match. You also have Antonia winning this match. So yeah, we'll have to see how this goes. But so they spin the randomizer wheel, and we get, for protein, whole rainbow trout. We get baby artichokes for the produce. They have to use the mini bunt pan, and then it is guilty pleasure for the style. And then for the wild card, it ends up on audience choice. Now, the last time this ended up on audience choice, I think somebody just shouted into the audience what they thought they should respin, and the audience was like, yeah. And so that's what they did. But this time, or maybe it was like a like by applause, but this time Guy just shouts in the audience, do you want to pick or just do a total respin? And the audience loves the idea of a total respin.
Yeah.
Much to the torment of the chefs, they do not like this idea. Because, the moment things start popping up, you start thinking of, oh, I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And, this doesn't look like a bad wheel. Trout, baby artichokes, guilty pleasure, bunt pan. That's the only one that it's like, okay, I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with that, but
sure,
it looks doable. Yeah. And I mean, guilty pleasure, who doesn't want to do a guilty pleasure? That's fun. But none of it ends up sticking. They do a full respin and they get none of what they had previously spun.
I love it when Antonia was like, I thought you were rooting for us.
Yes, exactly. She was like, I thought you were on our side. Yes.
She did look up.
Yeah. So they end up, what their actual wheel was sturgeon, Tuscan kale, mortar and pestle, and gastropub plate. Now, the moment this pops up, I'm sure that I, like Antonia and everyone that just listened to Antonia's resume, knows that Antonia owns a gastropub.
Yep.
So,
and Rocco knows too.
Yes. Oh, and Rocco's like, she owns a gastropub. So he knows this is right up her alley.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
he's judged her before. He knows that she's amazing. So
yes. Yeah. So he's already playing from the back foot.
Mm-hmm.
So Antonia decides that she is going to make fish and chips, and I gotta pull something up real quick. Here we go.
I'll say,
so
the fish and chips is probably the best thing she could have done for me personally, because sturgeon is not a fish that I want to eat, but I could eat it if you fry it and make it fish and chips.
Sure. Well, I mean, they mentioned that, fish and chips is a fish that, number one, it's got a lot of bones, so you got to deal with that. There's also the fact that, I mean, it's a meaty fish, but it's not necessarily a fish with a lot of fat. So, you're really going to have to work on getting some flavor into it.
Yeah.
I will say fish and chips for me is kind of a mixed bag because I have been to England. So I
Yep.
know what good fish and chips taste like. And here's the
Same.
thing. Most restaurants, even in Britain, don't get fish and chips right.
Oh yeah.
Fish and
Not at
chips,
all.
the best fish and chips are served on a newspaper in a stand on the side of a street that you eat at a random bench that you find while walking around, and you're literally eating it out of a basket from, like I said, newspaper.
Yeah.
That is the
It's like
best fish and
street food
chips.
in New York City. It's amazing, but you just gotta
Yes.
eat it right out of the cart.
Yes. And I have ordered fish and chips from other restaurants, and I'm almost always disappointed. Like I'm just like, it's good, but it's not the same,
Mhm.
And so for me, that's a risky dish for me. Like if I were one of the judges and you told me you're making fish and chips, I'm like, it better be the best fish and chips I've ever had.
Well, and I think
You know?
she knew what she needed to do, and
Yes.
she focused on the sauce.
Yes.
And I love what she did with the mushy peas because it was
Yes.
one of my favorite things when I was in England is
Sure.
discovering mushy peas. But
Mhm.
those are also like fish and chips. They're not all created equal. Sometimes they're just mushy peas. And you're like,
Well,
I'm eating
and
baby food.
also, depending on where you go in England, you may or may not get mushy peas. I've
Yes.
actually never had fish and chips with mushy peas because I've usually gotten it either in London, which is not typically it's more like a northern
Mhm.
thing.
And
If you
I've been to
get
York, so that's kind of
sure,
where I first, experienced
yes.
it, and
Yeah,
it
if you order
definitely is.
fish and chips in the north of England, in York, places like that, yes, you're going to get mushy peas. You order it in either the places where I've ordered it, which is mostly London and Edinburgh, and you're not
Mhm.
going to get mushy peas.
Yeah. You
Um,
have to that's like a whole separate order. Like, you have to be like, "Okay, I want mushy peas." It's not gonna
yes,
come with this dish.
right,
But I
right,
loved
um,
that concept. I love already where she's going.
right. Well, yeah, and she also made it with a tartar sauce,
Yes, and that
which
tartar sauce, I think, is key.
sure, sure. I mean, I will say if I was a person that liked tartar sauce, I think I would probably be very intrigued by,
Oh,
and
I hate
even
tartar
as
sauce.
someone,
I'm with
yeah,
you.
me too. But I
Oh,
was still
no question.
intrigued by what she was doing because it was
Yes.
not your typical tartar sauce.
Yeah, agreed. But I want some vinegar for my fish and chips. Don't give me tartar sauce.
Well, and I think she did do vinegar with it as well.
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
she actually cooked it in, I think, actually,
I
which
think
I
so.
think
I
is
think
actually
so.
really smart.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Um yeah. But then Rocco ended up making a bacon wrapped sturgeon with braised Tuscan kale. And I will say when he's preparing this bacon wrapped sturgeon, I'm looking at this and I'm nervous for Antonia because it looks amazing.
See, it's a personal preference for me. I never thought it looked good. But
Oh,
again,
really?
I'm not gonna eat sturgeon that way. I'm just not gonna eat it.
Sure.
Like, it's never gonna be
Sure.
good for me. So that's why I'm like, I mean, I'm glad you're putting the bacon on it. I understood the assignment. Like,
Right.
it doesn't have a lot of
He's
fat. You
trying to
need to
get
get
back.
that fat in
Yes.
it. Yeah.
Yes.
So that might have been good. I might have enjoyed it, but I
Right.
was never like rooting for that dish to ever hit my palate.
Sure. Sure. All right. So, let's see. Let's see. They're dealing with the sturgeon. Like I said, it's got bones and it needs fat. Justin ends up being really impressed by what Antonia is doing with the tartar sauce.
Yes.
Rocco apparently ends up making a really good date sauce. That gets
that
passed
looked
around.
good. That looked
Yeah.
really good. I do love bacon wrapped dates. And so to add that flavor, I thought was really smart, especially in a gastropub setting. Like that is
Yes.
a good parallel.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say a lot of what Rocco was doing here was reminding me of things that had been very successful in previous dishes for other chefs, like, you know, this sauce. He's making this kale and he's using it in several different ways. He made a fried kale chip,
It
which
looked good.
actually which actually was I think it was actually like a green that they did. But Britt Rossino did like a chip with some kind of green, and it
Oh,
was
I see.
really successful.
Yeah.
In one of her previous dishes. So a lot of what he's doing is actually making me really nervous for Antonia, because I'm like, these are very successful things that he is putting together. So, and let's see, we mentioned it already, but Antonia from the jump is talking about how much she wants to elevate these mushy peas,
Oh,
because
yeah.
she's talking about how she actually really enjoys mushy peas, but she feels like, and I will say, there are a lot of people, mushy peas are actually very divisive
Oh,
in England,
yes.
because like I said, depending on where you go, a lot of places don't even do it.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's what's the difference between having it as a dish and eating baby food? Like there's a balance there,
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I was hesitant too when I first tried them. I
Yeah.
do love peas, but I was just I
Right.
have a texture thing, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like
Sure.
this, but I did end up
Yeah.
loving them.
Yeah. So, she is working really hard to elevate the mushy peas. She's, bringing all of these things in. I think that's where her kale went, was in the
Yes,
mushy peas.
smart. I think that was a smart use of that.
Really smart.
And
I will
put some
say,
mint in there, I think.
yeah, we're actually getting some commentary from Guy, who actually apparently loves kale. And so when she's talking about putting this kale into the mushy peas, he's just like, that sounds like a really good idea. So, I will say, I've never actually had mushy peas. I wanted to try hers.
I did. I mean, I wanted hers. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I bet this is exactly what you need for a gastropub mushy pea, and she did it.
Right.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's she knew what she was doing.
Right. Right. So, as far as the finished product, I will say, visually, I was actually won over by Rocco's dish. It just, the
I
bacon
agree.
wrapped
Hmm.
sturgeon, and the kale chip, all of the stuff that he's doing. I'm like, visually, just because, like I said, for me, fish and chips, not in a you know a random fish and chip shop on a street, on the streets of England, a hard sell for me. So I was actually won over a bit by Rocco's dish, at least the look of it. So getting into the actual judging, so they get Rocco's first. Andrew enjoys a lot of the elements of it, but the one thing that he really mentions is that, and he's like, it's not necessarily the chef's fault. He's just like, sturgeon itself is a very muddy fish.
Yeah, muddy. That
And
was an interesting descriptor.
yeah, I will say muddy is a term that you will get with certain types of fish. You will hear it a lot with catfish.
Yes, which
It's
I don't like, which is why I'm probably not gonna like sturgeon. So like the
sure.
only way I'm gonna enjoy it is if you fry it.
Sure. See, I will say I actually really do like catfish.
Mm,
Partially because I grew up on it, but
yep.
there is a way that you can do catfish if you do it correctly that you do not get that muddiness.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're a little less familiar with it, you can just kind of make a rookie mistake and it can still be good, but there is kind of this muddy flavor to it. And apparently sturgeon is on a similar vein. And so he felt like the sturgeon itself was just a bit muddy. Scott actually had an interesting take. He said that there were elements of the dish on their own that he actually didn't really like, but when he put them all together,
Oh, he did say that.
he
Yeah.
thought they were really good. So I thought that I was like, that's a really interesting note. It's like, I mean, when you are building a dish like that, a lot of times it really is meant to be eaten together.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if you have elements that really don't work on their own, that does feel a little bit as a negative because you might not always be able to get everything in every bite.
Yes. Yeah. You really have to like. I mean, I think what Rocco did well is he knew how his pairings were going to work. I mean, I assume anyway.
Right.
You know, with
Right.
the sauces and what have you. But
Yes.
it was dangerous. It could have been dangerous for him. It could have
Right.
been a complete failure, but it was not.
Yeah. Right. Right. And Kat also agreed that it worked very well as a composed dish
Mm-hmm.
together. So then, it sounds decent for Rocco.
Yeah.
Then we get into Antonia's judging. And I will say, I'm instantly feeling bad for Rocco.
I know.
Because they cannot say enough good things about Antonia. First of all, before the verbal judging even starts, this is the moment that I had mentioned that they really wanted, that they thought was so interesting that they wanted it in the previews. Andrew Zimmern took a bite of the fish and chips and throws down his fork.
Yep. And Antonio was like, "Is that good? He's never done that before. Oh my god, what does that mean?"
Exactly. And it was just like, and I get it because it was like in a way, because obviously what he's saying is I might as well stop eating, but it's like, is that in a good way or a bad way? And as he talked, it was like, no, this is in a good way. Because so what he ended up saying, let's bring it back up. So he says, honestly, I didn't get everything down because he just said the word perfect a lot.
Yes.
He just, everything was good. Like they loved the peas, they loved the tartar sauce, they loved the fish, everything.
The chips were perfectly fried. I think the only thing is like he like the balance of
he wanted different ratios.
Chips. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
But that's like a side comment. That's not even like, that's just like, I'm picky, but this is fantastic.
Yes. And again, like I said, Andrew is an extremely discerned palate. So there is going to be, he is always going to give the chef something that it's like, this is the best thing I've ever eaten. but it can still be improved upon.
Yeah.
You know, I think Andrew Zimmern is very much a teacher.
Oh yeah.
He thinks that
I'm my drama teacher. It's like, that was great, but let me tell you how it can be even better. And I'm like,
exactly, because that's the thing. No matter how good something is, it can always be better. So I actually really appreciate that about Zimmern, because he gushes about this, but he still gives that one. You know, for me, I would have appreciated a different ratio. And honestly, I get that, because she had kind of like more of like a chip, more of what we think of as American chips, or what the British would call crisps. And I mean, I think Andrew was like, I don't care what you call them, they're good.
It's just good.
Yes.
And again, she taught us the way of frying and the way of cutting and slicing. And I'm just like, you know, if I almost feel like I could do it myself. I know I can't, but I love that they give those little snippets into their plan.
Yeah, I will say Scott also loved it. I didn't write anything specific that he said, simply because I was too busy writing down that Kat Cora said that she thought it was the best fish and chips she had ever
eaten, which is saying something.
That is something to say.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's when you basically know, like, oh, can Antonia lose this? I mean,
yeah. I mean, at this point, it's more just like, okay, by how much did Antonia win?
Exactly.
You know, is basically the question at this point. You know,
I mean, something that is pretty basic, can be divisive, and just was like, I'm going to make it perfection, and she did, according to the judges.
Yeah, as close as it possibly could be. That's what she did. So yeah, we get to the actual scores, and Antonia won, as we said.
It was not a 1 point.
No, she won with a score of 88 to 83. And 83, not a bad score.
No.
At all. Really good score. But Antonia, you know, the only thing that she didn't win outright was presentation, and they actually tied in presentation. Like I said, Rocco's looked good.
It was
Rocco's presentation actually won me over. But she won in taste 44 to 41, and the randomizer by 2 points, 35 to 33. Like I said, it's hard to beat a dish like that Kat Cora calls the best fish and chips she's ever had.
I mean, and she already started with the fact that she owns a gastropub, so that was just a no-brainer in her mind. So it was exactly, I mean, it was, she understood the assignment and she executed it flawlessly.
Yeah, I mean, you know, at this point, it really is. It's like, Rocco would have had to pull out a miracle to win this one. And I will say, we've seen that happen. Saw it last week.
It could have happened. It could have.
But it didn't happen this time.
Well, I was happy for Antonia. She is my one that I want to go all the way.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think I was one off on both their scores. You said it was 88 to 83. I had 89 to 84.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I you actually got an extra point for that.
Oh, wow.
Because you didn't get either one of them exact, but you, like you said, you got each of them. You were only off by 1 point. So yeah, you got one extra point for that. So you actually got 16 points this week, and I only got myself 10. I will say overall, I'm still beating you, but this week
you'll be fine overall.
yeah. But yeah, and like I said, this closes out round 2, and they'll be going into the quarterfinals next week. And I mean, it's gonna be some really good tight matches
Yeah.
in this next week and the coming weeks. So really, really excited about this.
Well, I mean, I just got to thank you for introducing me to this world because now I'm kind of like hooked on it. I was like, well,
Yeah,
I need to know who wins. I need to know how Antonia does. I want to see
yeah.
all these really amazing dishes. I love the gamification of it with the randomizer
Mm.
and like things like that are just fun. I mean, that's why I watch reality competition shows. Like,
Well, there you go.
I'll leave behind the dating ones and yeah, that's not competition for me. But
Yeah,
this one is close enough to a competitive nature where everybody's really good in their
yeah,
craft at what they're
yeah,
doing, and I really enjoyed it. And I mean, I love
yeah.
food. I don't cook. I mean, I that's not my bag, but I love to
Sure.
eat it.
There you
So,
go. Yeah. Yeah, and
um,
and I will say, I would say, even though who, or at least have a strong inkling as to who wins most of the previous matches, I would suggest going back and watching, the earlier matches of this tournament. Some great matches. It's all on HBO Max.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah,
I thankfully I have Max. And I can go back and whenever I get addicted
watch
to
previous
something,
tournaments even.
exactly. I'll probably
Yeah,
watch some prior seasons just
yeah.
to scratch that itch because it
Oh,
really is a lot of fun.
there's some exciting stuff in there too. It's some really good stuff. But thank you so much for coming on and talking about this with me. It's been great.
Yeah, 100%. Thanks for having me. This is a lot of
Yeah,
fun. I'm really glad that you're doing it and
yeah,
um, introducing people to this world, and kind of
absolutely.
and making it a game between us, all of
Yeah,
the commentators. It's a lot of fun.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
and thanks to everyone for listening. Hope you guys are enjoying it as much as we are. Make sure that you are keeping up with us. You can contact us at the Flying Cow Pod on all of our socials. You can also email at theflyingcowpod@gmail.com. Make sure you check out everything that we've got going on over there. And we will be back next week covering, as I said, the quarterfinals
ooh,
of this tournament. It'll also be the penultimate episode, and I think we've got a couple of returning guests for that one. I'm not gonna jinx myself, but you might be pleasantly surprised if you've appreciated some of our former guests. So make sure to tune in for that. But until that time, moo.
moo.